Hi there, Cradines. Welcome to another recorded DI or direct instruction. And let's focus on human reproduction. Now, with the booklet or the homework package on reproduction or biology, so much had been read about asexual and sexual reproduction in the pages of the booklet. There's something on mitosis, meiosis. I hope you're able to read through them and answer the questions. Heredity, DNA, and genes. Of course, the important word there would be the DNA or the deoxyribonucleic acid. Now, but this particular DI would focus on our life cycle. With human reproduction, to be considered as living, you must acquire specific self sustaining characteristics. And to be alive, we must possess all of the following. We should be made up of cells, obtain and use energy, grow and develop, respond to their environment, adapt to their environment, and reproduce. It was not an accident that reproduce was named last in the set of characteristics above. When we talk about human reproduction, we are talking about one of the most significant characteristics of what makes us who we are and proof that we are alive. So, what is reproduction? So, here is a very simple definition here. It's the process of generating offspring. There are two types of reproduction that exist in all living things. I know you must know this by now. It's sexual and what? Right, asexual. Now, with asexual reproduction, this type of reproduction involves only one parent. And the offspring that is produced from an asexual parent is genetically identical to its parent. And commonly, we can have microorganisms such as bacteria undergoing asexual reproduction, specifically through binary fission. Okay, binary fission. It's when cells divide into two daughter cells that are genetically identical. Now, in plants, vegetative structures such as the stems, the roots, and leaves reproduce in a distinctive process called vegetative reproduction. Another type of asexual reproduction is called budding. During budding, a new organism starts growing from the parent's body. Now, the advantages of asexual reproduction is mainly the fact that the organism that stays in one place and they don't have to find a mating partner to reproduce. Now, with sexual reproduction, now this is a type of reproduction where two parents contribute genetic information to produce unique and diverse offspring. Remember, with asexual, the offspring would be an exact replica of the parent. But with sexual reproduction, we can have diverse offspring. Just consider your family, right? Your siblings, you may have the same mom and dad, but there's a certain difference from one feature to another. Like you are not an exact replica of your brother or your sister. You are not a clone, right? So humans reproduce through sexual reproduction. To do this, parents combine two distinct types of specialized reproductive sex cells, and we use this term gametes. So gametes are sex cells. And this involves the female's very large ovum or egg and the male's smaller sex cell called the sperm. So each gamete contains half the number of chromosomes of normal cells. And again, chromosomes, what are chromosomes? They carry genetic information, the DNA, that controls inherited characteristics. Now, every cell in the human body that has a nucleus contains 46 chromosomes, and each sex cell contains half that number, so 23. During the fertilization, the 23 chromosomes in a male sperm join the 23 chromosomes in a female's egg. The result is a zygote with how many chromosomes? 46 chromosomes. 23 from the mom and 23 from the dad. So remember, a fertilized egg is called the zygote. Now, the sub might give you this, or I might give you this in class if I am in class. So I want you to just watch this recorded DI and so that you will be able to label the parts of the female and the male reproductive system. Let's talk more about this. So the male reproductive system, it produces a hormone called testosterone. So there are three male reproductive structures: the testis, right? So this is it, right? The one in green. And then you have the scrotum, right? And then what else? The one in yellow, the penis, okay? The testes, they are oval shaped, as you can see from the green image here. They are the organs of the male reproductive system in which sperm are produced. Testes also produce an important hormone called testosterone. Okay, so again, testosterone is a hormone that controls the development of the characteristics of men. Some of the characteristics that are involved with male maturity as a result of testosterone are facial hair, voice deepening, the broadening of shoulders, and sperm production. Now, the testes are located in an external pouch of the skin called the scrotum. So, this is where the scrotum is, right? The external location keeps the testes about 2 degrees to 3 degrees below 37 degrees Celsius, which is the usual temperature within the body. Now, the temperature difference is important because sperm need the slightly cooler conditions to survive. Now, on your diagram, so it's now easy to fill this out. So this one would be the bladder, this is the vas deferens, the urethra, the penis, the scrotum, and the testes. Okay. Now moving on, the sperm. So this is now the diagram. Sperm or gamete production. The production of sperms has begin in males during the teenage years following puberty. And you are now in this age. So each sperm cell is comprised of three parts, as you can see from this diagram. So you have the tail, this one, right? The flagellum, this would be the false feet that kind of keeps it moving quickly, right? It's a flagellum or the flagella. Now, the second part would be the midsection. So this is on the midsection. And finally, the head. Now, the flow and pathway of sperm involves a process called ejaculation, right? And young boys or even young men, they masturbate. They say usually in the morning, but it can be any time of the day. And it's just a normal phase of your life as a teenager. Now, of course, with ejaculation, there would be the semen, right? So semen is vital to the survival of the sperm. Semen contains about 5 to 10 million sperm per drop and provides nutrients that the mobile sperm use as a source of energy. Now, the semen is ejected through where is it coming out? The urethra. So, the urethra here can release the semen or the urine, right? But of course, during sex, usually urine is prevented from coming out from the urethra. Now, how about the female reproductive system? This is what you have now. The primary role of the female reproductive system is to produce eggs. If an egg is successfully fertilized, the female reproductive system is designed to nourish a developing baby until birth. Now, there are four female reproductive structures. These are the basics. So you can have the ovaries here, yeah, here, and then the fallopian tube, the uterus, right, and the vagina. Now, the ovaries are the organs that actually produce the eggs. Now, you have this diagram with you, so fill it out now. So, this is the ovary, the fallopian tube, uterus, the cervix, and then the vagina. Okay, so hopefully, no wrong spellings here because you have here the word bank. Now, similar to testes in males, the ovaries are endocrine glands that produce specifically or special designed hormones called estrogen. Remember, with the male, the hormone is called testosterone. With the female, the hormone is called estrogen. Okay, so unlike testosterone in males, estrogen causes the hips in women to widen and the breasts to enlarge. Each ovary is located near a fallopian tube. The fallopian tubes, also called oviducts, are pathways for eggs as they travel from the uterus to the ovary. Okay? Now, every month, also called the menstrual cycle, one of the ovaries releases a mature egg, which enters the nearest fallopian tube. Normally, fertilization or union of sperm and egg occurs within the fallopian tube. But then, if the ovum or the egg will not meet any sperm along the way, then that's when you have your mens or your menstruation. On the menstrual cycle, when the female reproductive system becomes mature, usually during the teenage years, there are about 400,000 undeveloped eggs already in the ovaries. So, as they say, we are born with a set number of eggs already. So, but only 500 of those eggs will actually leave the ovaries and make it to the uterus. An egg is released about once a month in a mature woman's body. This monthly cycle of changes that occur in the female reproductive system is called the menstrual cycle. Okay? Now, there are two significant things that happen during a woman's menstrual cycle. An egg develops in an ovary, or we can have what menstrual cycle develops in the ovary, and then, of course, if successful, then fertilization can set in. Okay, a journey to the uterus. In the initial stage of the menstrual cycle, an egg starts to mature in the ovaries. At the same time, the lining of the uterus begins to thicken. Just about halfway along the egg's journey, the mature egg is released from the ovary into a fallopian tube in a process called ovulation. Once the egg is released, it can be fertilized for the next few days if sperm are present in the fallopian tube. Now, if the egg is not fertilized, as I've said earlier, it begins to break down. The lining of the uterus also breaks down. The extra blood and tissue of the thickened lining pass out of the body through the vagina. Wrong spelling there, so correct that. In a process called menstruation. Now, menstruation lasts approximately between 4 to 6 days or even longer. At the same time menstruation takes place, a new egg begins to mature in the ovaries, starting the cycle once again. And as early as 10 years old, one can have one's menstruation or menstrual cycle. Now, the human life cycle. Of course, that happens when the sperm gets to meet the egg, right? And of course, once fertilized, we call this the zygote, okay? And we have here the diagram, right? 12 weeks. So the fetus is 7 cm to 9 cm in length and weighs 28 grams. So 12 weeks, that would be 3 months, right? That's why the first trimester of the pregnancy is very crucial and important for the mom. And 16 weeks, the fetus becomes around 10 cm to 17 cm in length and weighs 55 grams to 120 grams. And at this point, sex is differentiated. That's why with young couple, they usually have this gender reveal parties, right? If it's going to be a boy or a girl, so the ultrasound can just um, clue in the parents about the gender of the child. Now, 20 weeks later, the fetus continues to grow, and fetal movements can be felt by the mother. And heart sounds are perceptible by a stethoscope, so the doctor will know. Okay. After fertilization, the zygote undergoes especially design changes, and these were all the changes that I've mentioned. Now, development before birth. So 24 weeks later, 28 weeks later, and then 30 weeks later. Now, after a zygote is formed, it moves on the fallopian tube toward the uterus. This takes approximately 4 days. Once this happens, the zygote begins to divide. The original cell splits into two cells. These two cells continues to split to make four, then 16, and so on. Eventually, the growing mass of hundreds of cells forms a hollow ball called a blastula. The ball attaches to the lining of the uterus, thus from the two-cell stage all the way through the 8th week of development. The developing human is called a fetus from about the 9th week of development until birth. Okay, so the developing human is called a fetus. The zygote and embryo continued here. The explanation here. Now, the fetus brain is quickly developing, and it has a distinctive set of dark eye patches, and sometimes in an ultrasound, though, this is perceptible or this can be seen. So, fingers, little fingers there, and toes. So as you can see from here, right? Between the 4 and 6 months, what happens? Bones become distinct, and a heartbeat can be heard using a stethoscope. And as a sign that the fetus muscles are growing, sometimes moms would say, "Oh, I can feel a kick," right? So inside the uterus, and that can be really a different kind of experience. Like you can see finally the baby moving around your tummy, right, all over your tummy. So, and of course, that's where a new life begins. And there's that reading passage in the booklet as well on a new life. Now, there are three primary tissues membranes that both protect and nourish the fetus. So, how is it fed? Like, how does it survive, right? So, you have what we call as the amniotic sac, the placenta, and the umbilical cord. Now, the amniotic sac develops into a fluid filled sac or bag, and it cushions and protects the developing baby. It's just like what? A wet pillow, right? So the placenta here, on the other hand, forms the link between the embryo and the mother. And in the placenta, the embryo's blood vessels are located next to the mother's blood vessels. Blood from the two systems does not mix, but many substances can be exchanged between the two blood supplies. So it's very important that there is proper maternal health, no drugs, no drinks while you are pregnant. And the embryo receives the following two primary substances from the mom, okay? And you can have here the nutrients essentially. Now, the umbilical cord, right? So, what appears to look like a rope, this one, connecting the fetus and the placenta is called the umbilical cord. Now, this structure contains blood vessels that link the fetus to the mother. However, it is important to know that the circulatory system remain separated by a thin barrier. The function of the barrier is to prevent diseases from spreading from the mother to the fetus. Now, here's the problem. Some substances, such as alcohol, as I've said earlier, chemicals and tobacco, and many other drugs can pass through the barrier to the fetus. And the essential question here now would be, do you have a belly button? I think all of us have that, right? So, so we're hoping everyone would say, yes, I have a belly button. So that is the leftover of your umbilical cord, right? So they cut it close to your tummy. Now, when the baby is born, when you have a newborn, so this is what happens. They clump it, right? Now here, let's move on. Following the 9 months of development inside the uterus of a pregnant woman, the baby is prepared to live on its own and separated from the room. It is time to deliver the baby. The birth of the baby takes place in three stages. It's not as if out you go. No, there's always what? The first step: labor, delivery, and afterbirth. So, again, in your booklet, you have a reading passage on childbirth, labor. It's just like the baby saying, "Mom, get me out of here," right? During the first stage of birth process, strong muscular contractions of the uterus begin. Contractions is not comfortable, but essential, of course, in pushing your baby down the birth canal and out into the world. So, and it may take about 2 to 4 hours or even longer. So just be appreciative of the fact that you are now on this planet, right? Your mom gave birth to you, but it's not an easy journey, right? Now, the delivery, the second stage of birth, what happens here? During delivery, the baby is pushed completely out of the uterus through the vagina and out of the mother's body. Now, the head usually comes out first, but there are cases where the feet would come out first, and if there's difficulty, then there can be an emergency cesarean section or a C-section where they cut up the tummy. Okay, at this time, the baby is connected to the placenta by the umbilical cord. Shortly after, the umbilical cord is clamped and severed, maybe 5 cm from the baby's abdomen. Okay, and within 7 to 10 days, the umbilical cord will finally fall off, leaving a scar called the bellum here. Okay, so now the baby is born. We now have after birth. Okay, about 15 minutes after delivery, the third stage of the birth process begins. Contractions of the uterus continue to push the placenta and other membranes of the uterus through the vagina. So the baby out, and of course, where and the other extras there, like where it was enveloped in the first place, the placenta. Now, this stage is called the afterbirth, and it's usually completed in less than an hour. So, usually, after this, the baby cries to help get rid its lungs of fluid and fills them with air. Now, blood will then travel to the lungs and pick up oxygen from the air that the baby breathes in. Now, twins, the delivery of more than one baby from a single pregnancy is called multiple birth. In the United States, one out of every 30 babies born is a twin. Hmm, surprising fact here. There are two types of twins, what we call single twins or identical twins, but more of like what we call as fraternal or single, and then identical twins. Now, identical twins develop from a single fertilized egg, so one egg or zygote. Early in the development, the embryo splits into two identical embryos. The embryos have identical inherited traits. Now, fraternal twins, right, develop when two eggs are released from the ovary and are fertilized by different sperm. Fraternal twins are no more alike than any other brothers or sisters. Okay, and so when you say fraternal, just may or may not be the same sex. Hey, we have the baby here. Human growth and development now. So now, since the baby is out of the mother and is living on its own, what can it really do? A newborn can perform only simple actions, which include crying. Maybe if it's hungry or what, not comfortable, right? It cries. Yawning, sucking, do that, and blinking. So, of course, you don't jump into adulthood right away. You go through infancy, the first 2 years of life. Babies undergo many changes. And of course, when a baby is born, its head makes about half of its body length. And as the infant develops, its head grows more slowly and it's developing its muscular and nervous systems. At about 7 months, what happens? Most infants can move around by crawling. Somewhere between 10 and 16 months, most infants begin to walk by themselves, right? And they seem to be smiling, or they can now smile and laugh at us. Now, infancy then childhood. Infancy ends and childhood begins at about 2 years of age. Throughout childhood, children continue to grow. They become taller and heavier as their bones and muscles increase in size. And of course, they started to really be curious about the world. And then after childhood, you now have adolescence, right? And of course, physical changes still continue to occur, especially during puberty. And with puberty, so it's now the period of sexual development in which the body becomes able to reproduce. Puberty normally starts sometime between the ages 9 to 15 years old. How old are you? You must be in this age, right? The puberty age. In girls, hormones control the physical changes such as sex organ development, ovulation, and menstruation. In boys, sperm production begins as their voice deepens and hair appears on their face and chest. After puberty, you now have adulthood, the emotional and mental growth um, complements now the physical growth. And usually, this happens at age 30, right? And then, of course, after the age of 30, we now have the aging process. And from you see the different stages now, right? The phases of changes. So aging becomes more noticeable between the ages of 40 and 45. During this period, women stop menstruating and ovulating. Men usually continue to produce sperm throughout their lives. However, as men becomes older, the number of sperm they produce decreases. The effects of aging can be slowed if people follow sensible diets and good exercise plans. With the help of such healthy behaviors, more and more adults remain active throughout their lives. In addition, older people have learned a lot from their experiences and have gained a great deal of well earned wisdom, hopefully. So, from birth till aging, right? And I think this is it, like my short DI on human reproduction from zygote to adulthood. I hope for those who are doing remote learning, this is informative to you. But for those who are in class, I may do a repeat of this again. Okay, that's it for now. Falcons, ciao.